The doors of the royal council chamber opened, and the monarchy was changed forever. By direct order of the council, Camilla's title was stripped and given straight to Catherine. As the final words were read aloud, Camilla reached for the back of a chair, lost her balance, and collapsed before the council members who had just removed her authority. I'll be honest, when I first went through these details, I had to double-check everything. Camilla spent 40 years fighting to secure her place, but in a single morning, her official power vanished. Before we look at how Catherine took on this massive responsibility and what it really means for King Charles, hit subscribe so you do not miss a single update as this unfolds. Here is what actually happened behind those closed doors. Catherine remained in a private drawing room across Windsor Castle while the council completed its decision. Her exclusion protected the transfer from any accusation that she had demanded Camilla's mode's removal. That precaution also left her unprepared for the document William carried 20 minutes after the collapse. Without sitting down, William placed a sealed council envelope on the table. Across its front, the royal crest appeared above Catherine's formal name. Breaking the seal herself, she read a ruling that had already taken effect. Page 1 removed Camilla's ceremonial precedence. Beneath it, a second provision transferred Camilla's senior duties, staff, briefings, and authority over investitures and state receptions to Catherine. Finally, the closing paragraph transferred the Queen Consort title directly to Catherine. Shock came before any thought of acceptance. Instead of focusing on her new position, Catherine asked whether Camilla had accepted the arrangement. William explained that Charles had presented a voluntary withdrawal the previous evening. Under that proposal, Camilla would retain patronages, employees, and a reduced public role beside the king. Her refusal had ended the private settlement and triggered the council's final binding vote. Torn pages from the rejected agreement sat inside William's folder. For Catherine, that detail removed any belief that the transfer had been planned as a graceful transition. Nothing about the morning was ceremonial. One woman had rejected the last protected exit, collapsed during the ruling, and left another woman holding responsibilities she had never requested. Carefully, Catherine lowered the pages onto her lap. Next, the prince clarified why the council had acted without consulting her. Popularity had not earned the title, and family preference had not decided the vote. Evidence showed that Camilla had altered written commands approved by Charles, delayed briefings intended for Catherine, and issued conflicting directions to palace employees after the original instructions had left the king's office. Only one question remained: which royal command had exposed the interference? The answer began 3 weeks earlier at Windsor, during an investiture rehearsal that Camilla believed she still controlled. Windsor's state apartments were prepared for an investiture involving military officers, diplomats, and honored family. Charles had reduced his schedule and approved a ceremonial role for Catherine. His written instruction placed Catherine at the front of the receiving line, where she would welcome guests, escort recipients forward, and remain beside the king. 11:40. The document reached Camilla's office. Camilla read the page once, then summoned an aide. After crossing out Catherine's name, she wrote her own above it and ordered the amended list sent to the rehearsal team. Camilla did not consult Charles. Instead, Camilla replaced the sovereign's command with her own. 40 minutes before the doors opened, William found both versions on a desk. Because Charles had discussed the arrangement with him the evening before, the difference required no interpretation. Holding the original beside the altered copy, William found Camilla in the corridor and demanded an explanation. Rather than deny the change, she defended it as a correction of rank. Catherine's public popularity did not entitle her to stand above the Queen Consort. Those words exposed the purpose behind the amendment. This was not a printing error or an aide's misunderstanding of handwritten instructions. She had deliberately used the palace command system to reverse the king's decision. William kept the confrontation controlled and restored the original receiving order. Behind the gallery doors, Anne had heard the exchange. Taking the revised page from her nephew, she examined the crossed-out name, its replacement, and Camilla's written instruction. Before the ceremony began, Catherine took the position Charles had assigned her. Publicly, the investiture proceeded without disruption. Privately, Anne carried both documents into the king's study. Doors closed, she placed them side by side across Charles's desk. Confronted with his signature on one page and Camilla's alteration on the other, the king faced an undeniable conclusion. The king's authority had been deliberately overruled inside his own household. Charles examined the 2 pages at his desk. His signature appeared untouched on the original, while Camilla's handwriting changed the receiving order on the copy sent to staff. That comparison ended any argument about clerical confusion. Anne requested a review of every ceremonial directive routed through Camilla's office during the previous 6 weeks. By midnight, the deputy private secretary had retrieved the original files, circulated versions, delivery records, and staff acknowledgments. 3 alterations followed the same pattern. First, Catherine's 8:30 National Remembrance briefing remained in Camilla's office until 11:15, leaving the Princess of Wales 45 minutes to prepare for military representatives and bereaved families. Second, a youth literacy engagement assigned to Catherine had been redirected to Camilla's calendar after royal approval. Third, the reception order for visiting Commonwealth officials had been rearranged, moving Catherine behind 2 relatives whom Charles had placed below her. Each alteration occurred after the documents left the king's desk. None carried his initials, revised signature, or written consent. Staff testimony confirmed intimidation. One scheduling officer had questioned the remembrance delay and received an order barring her from briefings for 10 days. Another aide had preserved email timestamps showing that Catherine's office requested the missing file 3 times before receiving it. A third employee produced the amended reception list alongside the original version stored in the palace archive. Together, the records established intent, method, and consequence. Camilla's office had not corrected mistakes. It had intercepted approved commands, rewritten Catherine's role, and punished resistance inside the reporting chain. After reviewing the evidence, Charles closed the folder and canceled his appointments. Before midnight, he ordered Camilla to meet him in the private library the following morning. William and Anne would remain as witnesses because the evidence affected the sovereign's authority and the future reign. At 10 o'clock, 4 folders waited across the library table. Upon entering, Camilla saw her handwriting on every altered page and understood why she had been summoned. Morning light fell across the library table when Camilla took the chair opposite Charles. 4 folders separated husband and wife, each containing an instruction approved by the king and altered after entering her office. William sat by the fireplace while Anne remained near the windows. Rather than dispute the handwriting, Camilla defended the changes as protection of her position. Catherine's expanding duties, William's influence, and Charles's reduced schedule had created a second center of power inside the palace. She believed its growth would reduce her to ceremony before the next reign. Charles rejected that defense. Personal insecurity did not grant his wife authority to rewrite commands carrying his signature. For the palace to function, every aide had to trust that an instruction leaving the sovereign's desk would arrive unchanged. Consequently, the king presented 3 requirements. Camilla had to acknowledge the alterations, restore every affected duty to Catherine, and surrender control of the internal channel used to distribute official schedules and briefings. Compliance would keep the dispute inside the family. Refusal would send the evidence to a formal council review. Surrendering the channel would end Camilla's control over senior staff, access, and briefings. Acceptance protected her status but removed her personal power. Still, Camilla refused all 3 requirements. Her response shifted blame away from herself. Turning toward William, she accused the Prince of Wales of using his father's workload to advance Catherine and push Charles and Camilla's household aside. Calmly, William redirected attention to the 4 altered documents. Then Anne opened the staff file. Signed statements described retaliation after employees challenged instructions from Camilla's office. Faced with those records, Camilla warned Charles that a council review would destroy the public position he had spent years defending. The king did not withdraw his decision to begin the review. By midday, Camilla left the library without apologizing or surrendering the channel. After the doors closed, Charles authorized the formal investigation that would decide whether his wife retained her title. By authorizing the review, Charles also accepted that a unanimous final ruling would become binding across the royal household without requiring a second royal signature. 7 council members assembled 2 days later in a council chamber at Windsor. Before them lay the altered directives, communication records, staff statements, and a timetable tracking each document through Camilla's office. Digital timestamps established the sequence. Every instruction left Charles's desk intact. Changes entered the record only after Camilla or an employee acting under her written authority accessed the file. Catherine's household then received an amended version, a delayed briefing, or a reassigned duty. Beyond the paperwork stood an institutional failure. During the National Remembrance Ceremony, Catherine received the military protocol file 45 minutes before facing officers and bereaved families. Her team compressed 2 hours of preparation into that window. One overlooked precedence note would have placed a foreign representative in the wrong position before live cameras. William submitted the file. Anne presented signed statements proving that staff objections resulted in lost access and changed assignments. Together, those records connected Camilla's conduct to damage to the Crown's command structure. Next came the sealed appendix. If approved during the final vote, its provisions would remove Camilla's scheduling authority, transfer her ceremonial staff, block her access to Catherine's briefings, and reassign precedence decisions. Finally, the Queen Consort title and its duties would pass directly to Catherine. Nobody treated the recommendation as symbolic punishment. That title controlled rank, staffing, access, and authority during state functions. Leaving it with Camilla after removing its working powers would create two competing command chains. After 6 hours, the council approved a provisional recommendation to transfer Camilla's title and authority to Catherine. Charles read the conclusion twice, removed his glasses, and rested his hands on the table. Allowing the recommendation to advance would mark the strongest institutional rejection of his wife since their marriage. Halting the process would leave his commands exposed to interference. Across from him, Anne defined the consequence. Protecting Camilla from humiliation required Catherine, palace employees, and the future monarchy to absorb the damage. Silence held the chamber. Then the chairman placed the provisional recommendation before Charles. Before the council advanced it to a binding vote, Charles requested one night to obtain Camilla's voluntary withdrawal. That request postponed the final vote until 9 the following morning. Charles used the remaining hours to prepare a withdrawal agreement protecting Camilla's dignity without restoring her authority. Under its terms, Camilla would surrender the Queen Consort title voluntarily. 6 patronages would remain under her name. 12 employees would remain on her staff, and a reduced ceremonial role would keep her beside Charles at family services. Buckingham Palace would describe the transfer as a planned transition rather than a disciplinary removal. At 7 that evening, the king carried the agreement to Camilla's private rooms himself. Inside, 2 unsigned copies rested between them on a writing table. Their pages preserved 6 patronages, her residence, and security arrangements, while the final section would transfer staff, briefings, precedence decisions, and official duties to Catherine at noon. Camilla read every provision without turning toward her husband. Acceptance would protect her public reputation but surrender the palace machinery she controlled. Rejection would trigger the council's final binding vote and erase the protections Charles had negotiated. For 40 minutes, neither copy moved. Before leaving, Charles placed his fountain pen beside the signature line. He had defended Camilla through public hostility, family division, and criticism since 2005. This document marked the limit of that defense. Midnight passed without an answer. Shortly before dawn, Camilla called her private secretary into the room. Rather than sign, she tore both copies in half and sealed the pieces inside the council envelope. A written refusal accompanied the destroyed agreement. By 6:30, the envelope reached Charles in the castle. Opening it alone, he found the torn pages stacked beneath the unsigned signature sheet. Her decision had removed the last route to a private settlement. Consequently, the king informed the council chairman that negotiation had failed. Palace staff received orders to prepare the chamber, retrieve the sealed appendix, and summon Camilla for the binding council vote. Sunrise reached Windsor as her voluntary exit disappeared. Now the final decision would be compulsory. At 9, Camilla entered the council chamber wearing the controlled expression reserved for state ceremonies. Facing her, Charles sat at the head of the table. William and Anne occupied seats behind the members as witnesses, not voters. On the table lay the rejected agreement, sealed appendix, and transfer order. Proceedings began with the chairman reading findings into the record. 4 directives had been altered. Catherine's briefings had been delayed. Staff had faced retaliation after challenging Camilla's office. Camilla's written refusal had ended the voluntary settlement. 7 members voted in sequence. Every ballot supported immediate transfer. The first provision removed Camilla's control over ceremonial scheduling. The next removed her authority over staff, briefings, investitures, state receptions, and precedence decisions. Finally, the secretary reached the provision naming Catherine as holder of the Queen Consort title. Charles remained silent throughout the reading. Because he had authorized the formal review, the unanimous ruling became binding without a second royal signature. Camilla looked toward her husband and understood that he had allowed the council's final decision to take effect. Then Catherine's title was read aloud. Camilla's right hand moved toward the chair beside her. Color drained from her face. Her fingers closed around the wooden frame, but the grip failed before an attendant reached her. Within seconds, her knees folded and her body struck the carpet. Immediately, William called the medical team waiting outside. Anne cleared the documents from the table edge. The king pushed back his chair, took 2 steps, and stopped as physicians entered between them. Reading stopped. While Camilla was lifted onto a stretcher, an aide removed the embossed folder bearing her name. In its place, he set down a file marked for Catherine. That quiet exchange reflected what the vote had already completed. By the time Camilla was removed from the chamber, she no longer held the title. Across Windsor Castle, Catherine still had no knowledge that the Queen Consort position, staff, and authority now belonged to her. 20 minutes after Camilla left the chamber, William carried the council folder to the drawing room where Catherine had remained during the vote. Nothing around her revealed that her rank, duties, and household authority had already changed. Without ceremony, the prince set the folder before his wife and explained the binding council decision. Inside were new reporting lines for 24 employees and provisions covering 6 patronages, investitures, state receptions, sovereign briefings, and the Queen Consort title. Carefully, Catherine read the transfer order twice before turning to the report describing Camilla's collapse. Her attention stopped there. Accepting risks celebrating an injured woman's removal, refusing reopened the authority dispute. William outlined the result of rejection. Palace employees would receive conflicting instructions, ceremonial planning would lose its authorized leader, and Catherine's household would remain unable to assume the functions previously assigned to Camilla. A unanimous order would exist without an operational replacement. Duty settled the question, but Catherine attached 5 conditions. First, Buckingham Palace would stage no celebratory appearance. Second, she would wear no new jewels or insignia. Third, Camilla's charitable projects would continue under their existing names. Fourth, the public bulletin would acknowledge her years of service. Finally, Catherine's first statement would present the transfer as institutional responsibility rather than personal victory. Each condition protected the monarchy from turning discipline into spectacle. Before William answered, a private secretary entered with an update from the medical suite. Camilla had regained consciousness, undergone a medical examination, and refused to speak with Charles. Instead, she requested a private meeting with Catherine before the palace announcement. Catherine's concern replaced her shock. Recognizing the risk, William warned that the meeting created one final opportunity for pressure, blame, or refusal. Nevertheless, Catherine accepted because avoiding Camilla would turn her first decision under the new title into a retreat. Before 1:30, staff prepared a sitting room between both apartments. No advisors entered. For the first time that day, the 2 women would face the transfer together. At 1:30, Camilla entered the sitting room without her folder, secretary, or royal seal. Across from her, Catherine waited beside a table holding the transfer order. Between them lay the document removing one woman's authority and imposing it upon the other. Neither offered a greeting. Opening the meeting, Camilla asked whether Catherine knew about the vote. In response, Catherine explained that she had been excluded from every discussion and had received the order only after the collapse. That answer removed the accusation without reducing the loss. Next came the title. Seeking certainty, Camilla asked whether Catherine intended to accept it. Rather than hide her hesitation, Catherine explained that refusal was her first instinct until William detailed the institutional consequences. Empty reporting lines, divided staff, and disputed ceremonial authority would keep the conflict alive. For Camilla, that explanation closed the route back. Camilla's resistance gave way to fear. Public trust in Catherine had grown while Charles reduced his schedule. Meanwhile, William's approaching reign transformed each duty given to his wife into a warning. Every investiture, reception, and briefing transferred to Catherine made Camilla feel that the palace was rehearsing her disappearance. Camilla admitted that the altered orders had grown from that fear. Delayed files bought time to reclaim ceremonies. Reassigned engagements protected her visibility. Pressure on staff prevented their objections from reaching Charles before Anne's review. Admission did not excuse the conduct, and Catherine offered no absolution. Understanding, however, changed the meeting from a contest into a reckoning. Slowly, Camilla placed her hand on the transfer order and pushed it forward. That gesture accepted the loss of authority she had refused to surrender voluntarily before dawn. Although the title had delivered access, status, and influence, it had never produced security. Accepting the document, Catherine made one promise. Under her authority, trust would be restored without erasing Camilla's charitable service. By 2:15, the meeting ended. Through the corridor, Camilla returned to her apartment. Alone with the order, Catherine prepared to face the country. At 3 o'clock, Buckingham Palace released a bulletin confirming the transfer. Its language, named Catherine Queen Consort, confirmed the reassignment of Camilla's authority and stated that the order had taken immediate effect. Nothing in the public statement mentioned altered directives, delayed briefings, staff retaliation, or the rejected withdrawal agreement. That silence divided the public response. Television panels defending the council described the decision as protection of royal authority. Commentators supporting Camilla presented it as destruction of the king's wife without a public hearing. Placards outside Buckingham Palace gates carried both arguments in capital letters. Inside the car traveling from Windsor to Buckingham Palace, Catherine removed a diamond brooch. Wearing it would turn responsibility into celebration. William supported the choice and handed her the handwritten statement. When the car stopped outside Buckingham Palace, Catherine stepped out without smiling. She carried no ceremonial folder and displayed no new insignia. Her statement acknowledged Camilla's 40 years of service, accepted the transferred duties, and promised stable reporting across the royal household. Victory never entered the language. Across Windsor, Charles entered Camilla's apartment. He approached her as a husband, but the institutional decision remained fixed. Their marriage would continue. Control over schedules, staff briefings, precedents, and senior royal decisions would not. Finally, Camilla accepted responsibility without defending the alterations. Fear of Catherine's popularity, William's approaching reign, and Charles's reduced workload had driven her attempts to preserve control. Love survived. Trust in her judgment did not. Meanwhile, the council issued new reporting rules. Every command leaving the sovereign's office received a digital reference number, 2 authorized signatures, and direct delivery to the responsible household. No private office retained power to rewrite it. Before evening, Catherine sent Camilla a handwritten note promising that the new title would stabilize the family rather than erase her service. By sunset, Catherine held the position. Camilla had lost its authority, and Charles remained beside a wife the crown no longer trusted with power. The palace offered no celebration. It simply moved forward under a different queen consort.